Crepe cakes are basically edible clouds, soft, delicate, and way more impressive than they have any right to be. Torch some sugar on top and you get this addictive crackly bitterness against all that creamy sweetness. Today I'm attempting the mystery box challenge from MasterChef Australia Season 1 Episode 18. The ingredients were orange, chocolate, sugar, coconut, eggs, flour, and milk, plus some staples. For my interpretation, I went to Bouchon Bakery by Thomas Keller. A crepe cake with orange diplomat cream felt like the natural way to use those flavors together. I did use a few extras, but you'll see that it's totally possible to get the same results using just the mystery box ingredients. Day 1. Making the batter. It is super simple, we just need to blend everything together. You need 20 grams of melted butter, 500 grams of milk, 200 grams of eggs, or 4 large eggs, 200 grams of all-purpose flour, 20 grams of sugar, 60 grams of your favorite orange liqueur, 5 grams of salt, and 1-2 teaspoons of vanilla extract or vanilla paste. Now just blend milk, eggs, flour, sugar, liquor, salt, vanilla, blend it together, blend again, add the melted butter, blend again, easy peasy, no lumps, done in 30 seconds. Cover it with some plastic wrap directly on the surface and refrigerate overnight. Normally, you let the crepe batter rest so the flour can absorb the moisture and the gluten has time to develop. You do need to let it rest for at least 1 hour. Day 2. Cooking crepes, making the cream and assembling. First, let's make the custard base for our diplomat cream because it needs a few hours in the fridge. That way, by the time we're done cooking the crepes, it will be ready to go. Just a quick reminder, diplomat, it's just pastry cream with some whipped cream. Now, take 160 grams of egg yolks, it's around 10, 135 grams of sugar, 100 grams of all-purpose flour or burnt custard powder, 665 grams of milk, straight into a large saucepan, 35 grams of butter, 2 oranges, and 3 grams of gelatin soaked in 18 grams of water. Remember, always bloom your gelatin in 6 times more water by weight. I'm following the instructions exactly as the book says because I want to test it, but just know that there are a couple of ways to make pastry cream. Now, whip the egg yolks with the sugar until it's light and fluffy. Start whisking as soon as the sugar hits the yolks, or the yolks can burn and you'll get those tiny hard bits that you cannot get rid of. Then mix in the sifted flour, but don't overmix, we just want the flour to disappear. Now pour the egg mixture into the milk that's been sitting in the saucepan and turn on the heat and bring it to a boil. Make sure to stir constantly and pretty vigorously, scraping against the sides to break up any lumps. Make sure you're scraping the bottom too, because otherwise you can end up with some scrambled eggs. Once you see bubbles, boil for about 5 minutes, still stirring and scraping. We want to make sure that the flour fully thickens the cream and cooks out that floury taste. Take it off the heat, add the bloomed gelatin and mix until it's completely melted. Then run the cream through a sieve to catch any lumps, zest the oranges straight into the cream, add the butter, mix and cover with plastic wrap in contact. Now refrigerate it for at least 4 hours. Next, cooking the crepes. My batter kind of split after a night in the fridge, but it's fine. There is nothing that can be fixed with a quick blend. The book says to use a 10-inch or 25-centimeter pan, but mine is 7-inch, so I have to use less batter per crepe. Their amount is 55 grams per one, and I used around 35 grams. So you might need to calculate how much batter you need per crepe for your pan size. But yeah, measure it so they're all the same. The cooking part was a bit tricky because the batter wasn't runny enough for me to spread it and get an even thin crepe, so I also don't make crepes like ever, so I have zero practice. If you want yours to be perfectly thin and even, you might need to adjust the batter thickness with a bit of milk. I also don't have that special tool, no idea what it's called, the one that looks like a tiny floor mop that helps spread the batter evenly. If you have it, your life will be so much easier. Anyway, it took forever to cook all of them, but the process is pretty standard. Medium heat, about a minute per side, and you'll figure out the exact timing as you go depending on your pan and stove. I flipped mine with my hands because they're so thin that my spatula would just tear them. Once all the crepes are done, let them cool completely. To finish the diplomat cream, whip 265 grams of very cold whipping or heavy cream. Seriously, it has to be very cold. Then take the pastry cream out of the fridge and mix it a little to loosen it up. The book said to use 810 grams of pastry cream, but honestly, if you use it all, it will work too. Now here, I noticed my pastry cream was softer than I expected, and the reason for this is that the flour just isn't as strong of a thickener as the custard powder that they mentioned. They give both as alternatives, but custard powder is basically cornstarch, so next time I'd use that instead of flour. That's what I normally use for pastry cream anyway. If you still want to use flour, you'll need to increase the amount to at least 150 or even 200 grams. Next, our goal here is to combine these two textures with zero lumps. To make it easier, start by taking about quarter to a third of the whipped cream and folding it into the pastry cream. This lightens up the cream and gets the consistency closer to whipped cream. Once that's smooth and evenly incorporated, fold in the rest of the whipped cream. Make sure the color is even by the end, but do not overmix. You want to keep all the air from the whipped cream so that it stays nice and light. Finally, assembly time. The book calls for 80 grams of cream per layer, but since my crepes were smaller, I used about 55. The book also says to assemble the cake upside down on plastic wrap, wrap it up, and keep it under something heavy overnight in the fridge. Then the next day, you flip it before torching the top crepe so the bottom becomes the top. I didn't do that, I just assembled it like a normal cake, but I did keep it in the fridge overnight. It's supposed to be 13 layers with a 10-inch pan, but mine ended up a bit taller, again because my pan was smaller. Just keep going until you get the height you want. Now cover it and leave it in the fridge overnight. Day 3. Torching and tasting. Now I'm taking the cake out of the fridge. It's nice and soft and all the crepes and cream have kind of fused into this ridiculously good looking dessert. If I'd press it overnight, it probably would have been more stable, but honestly I'm fine with this. You might think I just want to set this cake on fire after 3 days of work, but no. We're just sprinkling some sugar on top and torching it. I caramelized mine pretty aggressively, but do it to your own taste. And finally, let's slice it. Look at all those layers. Even, balanced, exactly what you want from a crepe cake. The flavor is genuinely great. Orange comes through clearly without being aggressive, the liqueur from the crepes is actually noticeable, and the caramelized top adds exactly the right bitterness against all that cream and sweetness. When I tasted everything separately before assembling it yesterday, I thought it needed more sweetness, but together it's actually perfect. I wouldn't change a thing here. As a mystery box solution, I'm happy with it. Although, would it survive an actual MasterChef kitchen? Probably not. 3 days is slightly over the time limit. But the recipe works, and that crackly top alone is worth getting the torch out. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.